Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for taking the time in this Friday afternoon in a sunny weekend to spend these 15 minutes with me. So yeah, I'm the Senior Director of Analytics and Neuroscience at Meta. And actually, so yesterday you might have seen Meron. Some of you will have seen Meron going through the history of Meta. Today I'm slicing a personal history through that and actually giving you the reason why I changed my formal title that's outside from designing for the future of spatial computing to designing with neuroscience for the future of spatial computing. So I was an academic. So I was a tenured academic for 13 plus years. And actually, as I was moving to the next chapter of my academic career in vision neuroscience, actually, with a promotion, one morning in the early 2014, the Italian newspaper La Repubblica, that was ritually every morning in the lab at Stanford I was at, I was checking the Italian news, the sport news first, and then the regular news. This was my ritual. And that morning, the newspaper La Repubblica, the website was showing the Forbes 30 under 30, and within that list, Meron showed up, and possibly for an impulse of curiosity, I went to look for the website, and the website was pretty obscure, but he had an info at metasomething.com. We changed domain many times over these years, and I sent an email. And I got a quick response to go talk to them the day after. The day after, Meron hosted me. He gave me a demo and invited me for a talk the next day, the day after. I then realized that random act was going to change, was closing the door of my academic career and opening the door of an incredible new life, new professional life in the industry. But that was a very exciting move. And this is the first trigger of what I'm going to be talking today. Actually, this is the very last slide of my talk on February 6, 2014, where I started, in this last slide, I was giving my naive vision. I was a pure basic science academic since then of what cognitive or vision neuroscience or the interaction neuroscience, if you wish, could give to the field of augmented reality and actually get back from augmented reality. And you see like vision, multisensory perception, attention, and cognition. Actually, the vision hasn't changed much since then. It just expanded and got deeper. We did a long path since then. We released Meta 1 and opened the Meta 2 that whose launch was completed yesterday with the announcement of the workspace. And this brings me to expand a little more without giving you an academic lecture about why we're using neuroscience at Meta. Well, the human brain evolved as a very powerful machine to support interactions, okay? Interactions with objects, interactions with other people, interactions with ourselves, and interaction with the world in general, right? And given that the most probably complex and elegant biological structure of the universe has been tailor-made to support interactions, we agree that it's simply logic to base the way we create this new paradigm of spatial computing to what we know from the brain, right? Because indeed, a user interface is a set of tools to interact with digital content. So we had an extra set, we have the others, we have the world, we have the tools, the physical tools. Now we have a lot of digital content to deal with actually in space. And if those two premises are true, then we can wonder what neuroscience can teach us when it comes to the design of spatial interfaces. And this is why more than 2 years ago, we started a phenomenal, actually, interdisciplinary journey in a team of top-notch interaction designers, UX experts, visual designers, scientists, and developers under the direct lead of Meron, our CEO, that brought us to create a document that is now public and published, which is the Meta Spatial Interface Design Guidelines. As you see, the subheading there is augmented reality and neuroscience. So this is a manifesto of some sort in which we provide the science and the design insights to create no longer for a flat interface, but for an interface that deploys in space and we interact directly with. We're showing a computer to people's size, to people's senses, to people's brain, and we need to get this computer to fit to the brain as a glove fits to a hand when a glove fits well. And this is our vision. This is a manifesto, and it's not a step-by-step guideline. It's not our IKEA instruction manual. And it will complement, just to give you a little like introduction to that, with specific tactical guidelines specific for Meta 2. So without speaking much in the premise, now I will review the different principles, and you will see that there will be some in the interaction space, some in the way we distribute visual information in space, but we'll go much further than that, okay? And some of these will be provocation that we would like to get a lot of feedback on. So the first principle is called Think Spatial. Place tools and content in space. This is about a little bit about the what we're gonna place there, okay? And also, so the heading is replace flat layouts of windows, menus, and buttons. We generally favor only half of the visual system, the visual system that deals with recognition and the symbolic iconography, if you want, of traditional computing, with a spatial interface that arranges tools and content in the 3D space around the user. This leverages the user's full perception of form and depth. The visual system is inherently developed to let us deal with the space in 3D, not with flat space. This is the Middle Ages flat space, and to transform every visual input into an action, and that happens in space, okay? So this is easy as it gets, but we advocate not to reproduce our existing flat devices interface in space, and rather to create a set of tools that are arranged in the space around us. Principle number 2 is minimize abstractions. Design tools with volume and affordances. So now we understand how we arrange objects in space. How should an object look like? How should a tool look like itself, right? So we advocate to replace abstract representations, such as flat icons, with volumetric tools that features physical characteristics or affordances that suggest their use without explicit instructions, okay? Without having an icon, without reproducing, for example, the very complex Photoshop-like set of icons for power users, we should get a very easy and intuitive affordance on the object, and we can start doing that with this new interface. The neuroscience underneath that is that we got specific centers in the brain that transform the visual input, even the identity of an object and the way it shapes into space, into a very complex set of motor commands for our hands to work on that object, okay? And this is a straight pathway, okay? It doesn't require intermediate steps, like what we've been doing with computer interfaces so far. Principle number 3, you are the OS. Organize holographic files and tools in the user environment. Replace the traditional file system, which demands continual decoding of abstract symbols and hierarchies, with spatial organization of files in the world that leverages the brain's spatial memory, naturally tracking the content of our peripersonal space. So this is about the where. Okay, we got the what, we got the how, and now the where. Okay, where are we gonna put our files? Are we still getting lost in complex nested structures that tap into our semantic memory, or do we want to rely on the memory of space that can have limitations, as I was discussing with one of the people who's giving us feedback right this morning? It's got its limitation. We lose our phone around, but still, that can be an extra layer of memory that traditional computers couldn't simply use because they were confined into a flat, spatially very localized display. Principle number 4 is touch to see. Use the hands to interact directly. So, okay, replace remote gestures with direct manipulation, leveraging the neuroscience of interactions, namely the brain's naturally heightened understanding of objects near the hands. I have an extra slide for this. This is Meron, yes. And this is the space around Meron in the brain's term. So the brains decode the space around us in 2 layers, if you wish. One is the peripersonal space, which is the space around reach. Even Leonardo had the, okay. And the other is the extrapersonal space, everything that's out of reach. The brain encodes these 2 spaces with very different, distinct mechanisms. You can have brain injuries that impact one and not the other. Interestingly, within the peripersonal space, there is a specific set of mechanisms that deal directly with the space around the hand. This is why we want to collocate our hands to the objects, to the virtual objects, versus having remote gestures or using our traditional input systems. And this is why the touch screen within flat interfaces became such a revolutionary way of interacting with machine. Pinch to zoom right where our icon is. Now we're doing that in space. So the air grab was launched yesterday. Going forward, this is about the attentional systems in the brain. We've been living with a lot of notifications and pop-ups in our computers, but throughout the 90s to our current phones. Spatial computer demands spatial notifications. So rather than interrupting the user workflow with a lot of pop-ups, just design a specific receptacle with visual and acoustic notification that fades gradually, because we know that the brain has a circuit breaking attentional system that interrupts every task flow if it detects sudden transient stimuli that pop up very rapidly, and they will distract our task. And augmented reality, of course, is a technology that supports a lot of tasks of our daily life, whether we're in a manufacturing line or we're a doctor performing a surgery, right? I'm trying to go fast. I don't have much time left. Principle 6 is avoid surprises and magic tricks. Pair actions with intuitive outcomes. This is about no magics, right? We want to rely as much as possible to the user existing mental models, or in the Bayesian neuroscience terms called priors. If we create magic, that would trigger the activity of the error neurons. Error neurons, dopaminergic neurons, they are very useful for learning, but we don't want to learn an interface. We want to learn something through the interface. The interface should be as smooth as possible and provide as deep as a content that we can provide, okay? Again, I'm going fast. Number 7 is the social neuroscience. The holographic campfire, don't obscure hands and faces with the UI. So replace UIs that block eye contact with a shared space that promotes it, and ensure that hands are visible while collaborating. Because we have 2 main mechanisms in the brain that suggest that. The first is the face coding rich series of mechanisms. We have exquisite mechanisms to code faces, to code facial expression, to code direction of gaze within like a fraction of a degree. If you're looking at me or if you're looking behind me because I'm boring you, I can detect that. And the second is the mirror neurons. The mirror neurons are neurons that activate when we're doing an action, or when a transitive action on an object, or when we're doing something else doing the same action. If we co-work on the same object, we get the mirror neurons at work, and there are primary mechanisms for practical learning, hands-on learning, if you wish. Number 8, public by default. Okay, this is about the anxiety we can generate when we have a device that acts, on others' life, the Google Glass, if you want, problem. Replace private UIs with a common digital environment for all meta users that leverages the neuroscience of the theory of mind and ensures comfortable awareness for all participants. We should know what we're working on. Okay, we should see what others are working on. Otherwise, if we see people doing actions, that creates a natural anxiety, because we have mechanisms to interpret people's intentions and people's behavior, okay? So we advocate that whenever we're using glasses, everybody should be looking at what others are doing, not the details, not private emails, but the objects we're acting on, the type of actions they're doing, okay, on a panel, on a 3D object, and so forth. Last one, this is very provocative. I think we're gonna be talking by email if you like that. But we advocate augmented, non-mixed reality, enhance user perception with relevant information. Rather than block user reality or distort it, as in mixed reality, to our definition, provide meta UIs, metadata about the world, near the world, without occlusions and without creations of fantasy worlds. That adds something useful to the understanding of the environment and the ongoing tasks. This is the ultimate aim of this document, create informative, powerful, and unobtrusive layers of digital information on top of the real world, okay? We want to increment tasks. We don't want to create digital worlds because we know that if we create we create a fantasy world on top of the real world, this will be the ultimate dystopian. Way more than a fantasy world in virtual reality. A fantasy world in virtual reality is way more legit from even a psychiatric point of view. In this document, we have the science underneath that, the science underneath normal delusional tendencies. That's very interesting but provocative in a way, so we'd be very happy to discuss. In fact, I'm closing because this is just the beginning. This is a manifesto. This is an opening document that would like to interact with all the community here and see what you think and see what you think scientifically from the design standpoint, from how much freedom we can afford to our designers. And you can download, at the first link, you can download the guidelines. If you want to know more about our neuroscience approach, in my LinkedIn page, there's a link to the TEDx talk I've given on this and a few other neuroscience-related events that we did. And you can email me directly if you're curious about this provocative talk, I guess. Thank you.